and welcome back to my channel. It's good to have you on yet another video on this channel again. If you are new here, you are most welcome. My name is Elizabeth. You can call me Beth. And if you're a returning subscriber, you are the real MVP. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you how I made this button-up skirt. This method applies to any button-up skirt you want to make, with or without the pockets, and with or without lining, and regardless of your fabric choice. So this is the universal method to make a button-up skirt. But without taking too much of your time, let's get right into this video. And if you have not subscribed, why haven't you subscribed to my channel? Please subscribe. And like this video if you found it useful, and share with your friends and family and loved ones. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. The first thing, I'm going to trace my skirt block. If you have one, just follow the same process, or if you don't, I have a link to a video that I made on how to draft a skirt block. Of course, you can adjust it. You can follow the same video for any length of any skirt. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust my center front after tracing out. So I'm going to go ahead and mark 1 inch first for my placket, my bottom placket, and then I'm going to mark 1 inch minus 0.1, what I just showed you. So 1 inch minus 0.1, and then I'm going to mark 1 centimeter for my seam allowance that I'm going to use to fold in. So I'm just going to duplicate that along my center front, just down. I'm not altering my back skirt block, just my front skirt block. So up and down to my M line, M allowance, and then I'm going to just draw the line, connect the dots, and draw it straight. So I'm just drawing all of them, the first 1 inch, the next 1 inch minus 0.1, and then 1 centimeter. So just connect all of them and draw straight lines, and then connect at the top to elongate your center front. And the first one is for my bottom placket, the second one is for my interfacing, and then the third one is for my seam allowance. For my pocket, I'm going to come down from my hip line and mark 4 inches. I'm not on the tall side, so I don't want it to be too long. So I have 14 inches from my waistline and 4 inches from my hip line. But if you are on the tall side, you might want to make it 5 inches, or adjust as you deem fit. And then I'm going to extend my dart line, the center one, my original dart line. I'm extending it to the point where I have my pocket. So if you have a set square, this will come in handy, but I don't have one. So but my paper is as dots, which would help me to get straight lines. So just be sure you're getting straight lines. And then I'm going to connect that mark on my side seam, that 4 inches, to my dart line, to the extension of my dart line. For my pocket opening, I'm going to come out from that dart line by 1.5 inches, and then come down my side seam by 6 inches, and then I'm going to connect the 2 points. So then try and see if your hand will fit into that. Even though my skirt the pocket is more for a decorative purpose, so I'm not really too worked up about this. But if you have the intention of using it, just try and see if your palms will enter. And then I'm going to note my pocket. So from my dart line then I'm going to mark it, so that I'm going to trace. By the time I'm tracing this out, it's going to be easier for me to show that that's my pocket. So it starts from there, and because I want to keep this pattern, I'm just going to trace out this pocket so I don't have to alter it too much, so that I can erase this pocket away later. Then come up by 1 centimeter or half of an inch, and then cut out my skirt pattern. So I'm going to go ahead and fold my fabric into 2, selvage to selvage, so that I can cut along the grain line. So because my fabric does not have any stretch along the grain, like you can see, but crosswise it has just a little bit of stretch, but it's manageable. But because of the pattern of this fabric, I'm going to go ahead and violate that principle, because again of the pattern on my fabric. But if yours does not have any pattern you would want to follow, please go ahead and cut on green. So having pinned down my pattern, I'm going to extend it by 1 inch allowance. But if you are not sure of your measurements, you can extend it by more. Of course, it's better to have more and then trim it down than to have less, because you would be left with little or no options at all. So 1 inch allowance is what I'm adding to my skirt block, and of course I've added to my hemline already, and I've added to my waistline already. So the only part I have left is my side seam, which I just added 1 inch. My back is cut on fold, and then I'm transferring my notches. Then I'm going to go ahead and transfer my dart, just the normal way I would. If you have watched my previous video, you would have known that this is my preferred way of transferring my darts. So but whichever way works for you, just go ahead and transfer your darts. And then for my notches, I notched all the vertical lines, the extension, my button plackets, the interfacing, and the seam line, so that it can be easier for me to fold it when I want to iron it out. And then I just notched the beginning of my pocket opening too, so that it can be easy for me to identify when I want to fix my pocket. And then where my pocket is going to, the opening is going to stop as well. I already notched it, as you can see. Okay, so I'm going to remove my pattern, of course, from my fabric, and then I'm going to, this is my back bodice, but the same thing for the skirt, for the front bodies too. I keep saying bodies, skirt block. And then I'm going to mark my darts, whichever way you prefer to do yours, please go ahead. And I'm going to use my skirt, the fabric, to cut out my lining. If you are not using any lining, please keep the process and just keep watching. So I'm just going to, so just the same way, the two pieces of the front, cut the same lining, and then the back piece too. And then for this, I'm going to come to the midpoint of my skirt, of my pocket opening, and then just go in by 0.5, about 1 centimeter rather, and then draw that curve so that it's not just straight, but that's based on your preference. So I'm just going to trace that out on my paper, just the paper that I joined together with sellotape, so that I can get that straight line, that elongated paper. And then I'm just going to trace. Please be careful to be sure you trace along the right lines. You want to be careful about that. And then I'm going to use my pencil to trace it out. You might not be able to see this, but I can see it. And then pin on my fabric. I folded my fabric into two, and then I'm adding 1 inch that I have on my side seam on my skirt pattern, and then 1 centimeter on my pocket opening, and 1 centimeter around all of the sides of my pockets. I'm just adding 1 centimeter. The only side I'm having 1 inch is my side seam, the side seam of my pocket, because that is what I have on my skirt. So I'm just going to cut that out. So I'm going to apply my interfacing thereafter to the edges of my pocket, and I'm using woven interfacing. It's called Estee in Nigeria, if I remember correctly. And then I'm just going to apply it and exempt my corners. So I'm not going to apply interfacing to my corners. So I have this piece of fabric that is the same length with my pocket opening, and it's 3 centimeter wide for me to be able to finish off my pocket opening majorly. So as you can see, the corners are without interfacing, so that they don't come out bulky by the time I'm sewing or stitching them in place on my skirt. So I'm going to go ahead and fix this little piece of fabric right sides together, and I'm going to sew 1 centimeter that I added both on allowance, that I added both on my pocket opening, and then sew this in place, as you can see. I'm having my dart first. Of course, I'm going to do a reverse stitch at the beginning, and then I'm going to allow the thread at the end to run off, so that it gives me a better finishing. But any preferred way is okay. I'm going to secure that multiple times by tying it in place and trim away the excess thread. I'm doing this for all of my pieces, and including my lining. Yes. And then here is my pocket. I've sewn in the 1 centimeter allowance, then fold it. Look, just watch me fold in the fabric, fold it to cover it, and then turn both of them inside again to give you your exact pocket opening. So I'm just going to go ahead and secure this in place and sew at the edge, towards the edge. So this is what it looks like right now on the right side, and then on the left side this is what it looks like, all secured in place. And this is my pocket opening, and then here it is. So I folded in all the allowance that I have at all of the edges, except for the side seam, because of course that wouldn't be folded in. Then align my notching to my pocket opening, and then of course the other side to my dart line. And then of course match up the edges, the side seam as well, pin in place. And then I'm going to sew just a straight line, and then sew in place with your sewing machine. Of course, like you can see, I just sewed in that line right down and then down to my, and that's all. So I have this part opened and then the other part secured, like you can see. And then the next thing for me to do is to fold in. I folded in my placket, my bottom placket, and then I've added my interfacing to the middle part. So this is the middle part, the one that is less than 1 inch with 0.1 less. Then the seam allowance of 1 centimeter folded in place as well. Of course, my notchings were a guide in doing this. So the next thing for me to do is to apply. I folded in my lining at the hem line. Of course, I did cut it shorter than my skirt length, and then my dart has been secured in place. So all of those things done, and then I don't advise you trim down your, of course, if you use your fabric to cut out your lining, it's safer not to trim it down at this point, just in case, just to be sure that it's going to enter your bottom placket. So just wait a little bit before you trim it down. So place the right sides together, your fabric and your lining, if you are using lining of course, and then sew in place. Just pin together and sew in place. But if you are not using lining, of course, you can skip this process. But I'm using lining majorly because my fabric is a see-through and I wouldn't want to commit a fashion faux pas or whatever it is called. So I've done that. I just took in a little bit, and then I folded to the right side, give it a good press, and then this is what it is. It's going to go inside my bottom placket. At this point, you can trim it down if it's too long. Of course, it's going to be too long. You need to trim it down, and then you cover with your bottom placket. So this is what it looks like, and secure with pins for you to be able to sew down in place. So then I'm going to go ahead and sew it right here, all the way from my waistline to my hem allowance. And after that, I'm going to sew this other edge. But before this, I'm going to sew my hemline in place. So just watch me while I do that. So I'm just securing that in place, removing my pins all the way down to my hemline allowance, and then I'm securing my hemline in place, my allowance folded, and then the raw edge folded inside as well, about 1/2 inch, and secured in place. And I'm going to go ahead and do my second. If you look at this place, just see that I tried as much as possible to align both edges so that one is not protruding and the other is not receding. So I'm going to go ahead and sew the other edge, the outer edge, in place all the way from my hemline or waistline, as based on preference. So I'm starting from my hemline and then I'm sewing all the way to my waistline. So this is my back piece as well. I've sewn in the edges, and then I'm going to give it a good press and sew my hemline as well, my hem allowance in place. The next thing is for me to do is to sew my side seam. But before then, I'm going to secure my bottom placket on both sides of my front pieces in place, just the way it would be if I had buttons on them, and then place the right side of my front and back pieces together and sew the side seam in place based on the allowance that I added, which is 1 inch. So this is what it looks like after I joined the side seam. And I'm going to go ahead and press. I did give it a good press, opening up the seam lines and the seam allowance rather, and then I'm going to come to my waistline and measure whatever I have there, although you can use your waist measurements, but I just wanted to do this just to be sure again. And then whatever you have there is what you're going to use to cut out your band. So I have this band, I cut along the grain where there is no stretch on my fabric, and then I have 5 inches rather, so 5 inches, but 4 inches majorly, and then the other 1 inch is half on both sides as seam allowance. So this is a half of an inch, and then I applied interfacing, the same interfacing on one of the sides, the one that is going to be on the outer part of my skirt band is where I have the interfacing. So I've done that, and then I folded in my my allowance, and then I'm going to turn it to the wrong side and sew in place. So I'm going to sew the 2 edges in place and stop at my I'm going to fold just one side and stitch it down to where the fold ends. Just watch me. I'm just using some pins to secure the edges together, and just sew it down, and then turn it to the right side before I attach to my skirt band. So here one side is folded, just sew it straight and stop where you have the fold, and this is what I have. Turn it to the right side and press. And of course I'm going to align the 2 edges of my band to these 2 edges of my skirt, like the button stands. Please make sure that the 2 sides are aligned so that one is not protruding more than the other to give it a good finish. I did start on the wrong side, and then I tucked in my raw edges, my seam line, my seam allowances, and top stitched on my right side, just to be sure that I'm sewing it well, it's coming out clean. So for my top stitch, I'm starting from the middle, and then all the way to my center front, to my middle front or center front, yes, because of course I have 2 center fronts now because of the button placket. So all the way right to the middle, and then I'm going to, if you are sure that you get you wouldn't have too much thread or stitch on your center front, you can start from your one center front and finish off on the other 2. So for my buttons, I'm just going to go ahead and sew my button hole. I'll probably do a video sometime later about how to do your button hole, but if I put that here, it's going to be too long and I wouldn't want that. So just keep your fingers crossed, and of course go ahead and put your button hole and sew your button in place. For my button, I did place them 2 inches apart because of course it's a skirt, and this is the wrong side of my skirt. You could as well apply some press buttons in between your buttons if you are worried about any opening, but there won't be opening if it's not too tight on your body, so it's something you can do away with. Alternatively, you could decide to affix a zipper at the back of your skirt and just close up your button stand, but this just works well for me. It's just an alternative. But if there are still some gray areas you would like to clarify, please let me know in the comment section below, and I will be glad to answer you, to give you answers to the best of my ability. And that is that about that, as far as that is concerned. In this video, thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe. More amazing contents and projects are coming your way on this channel. Thank you, and I'll see you in my next video.